Have a blessed day, everyone. Teachers, dear classmates, viewers. It is an honor for me to stand in front of you today. I am Mia May Verdalusa Palencia, third year college taking Bachelor of Secondary Education major in English. Today, I am going to deliver a speech regarding what will happen to the Philippines 20 years from now. We are at a critical point where rapid change is forcing us to look not just to new ways of solving problems, but to new problems to solve. Tim Brown, a designer, once said that. It is a paradox that in our time of drastic rapid change, when the future is in our midst, devouring the present before our eyes, we have never been less certain about what is ahead of us. Well, that's according to Eric Hoffer. He's an American moral and social philosopher, by the way. Don't you think they are right? Or maybe not. However, have you ever been thought of the future? What do you think will happen to the Philippines 20 years from now? I'm not saying that we must make prophecies or to become like Nostradamus, but come to think of it, we can draw our own deductions based from the current trends, including current events, popular will, and various government acts. Well, I presume that we are all fairly well versed on the social, political, economic, and in all aspects of our country's growth and development. Every prediction shows two sides of a story, positive and negative. We can't say if it is a good thing or not, but maybe it is, as it depicts the reality. 20 years from now, maybe a lot more different, and it might bring rapid changes in every aspect of human lives. In most people's perspectives, they see the world having robots, flying cars, and other programmed and automatic machineries. They see the world having artificial intelligence at the center of everything. But who knows? The world might become more eco-friendly and organic. On the other hand, if the Philippines can be more modernized when it comes to advancement of technologies, can you imagine how our lives might become much easier? If there are lots of devices that we can use to do common chores and duties in a simpler and faster way for us, our lives will drastically change. Look at the public transportation around you. Look at the different equipment in your home and all the gadgets that we use in our everyday lives. Look at the infrastructures and compare it to how we live our lives before. There are already lots of changes, don't you think? In those 20 years that are coming, there will be more changes to come. The Philippine economy is expected to grow continuously until 2050 and beyond. In fact, according to the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation Limited, or simply HSBC, one of the world's largest banking and financial services organizations doing business in Philippines for over 132 years and currently employed over 8,000 people. The Philippines could be one of the richest countries in the world, and it might climb to number 16. That is because Philippines is one of the fastest growing economy in all Asian countries since Filipinos were naturally industrious, productive, and hardworking that helps the country to be developed. There are countless conjectures about the Philippine economy in the future. But as to what I see in my research, it is solely about the Philippines being one of the biggest in the world. Let us see how the HSBC arriving at the idea of the Philippines becoming 16th top country. The HSBC grouped the countries into three categories: the fastest economies, growth economies, and stable economies. The fast growth economies are those that are at a low level of development but which have sufficiently strong underlying fundamentals so that they catch up with more developed economies with similarly strong fundamentals. The growth economies, which are also set to outperform many of the developed world economies, are those that have sheer size of their working population. And the stable economies are those that can offer more limited growth prospects. These largely include the high growth and the aging economies in the developed world. The HSBC considered the Philippines in the fast growth economies category together with China, India, Malaysia, and Vietnam among others. HSBC admitted that they did not base on the past performances but rather on certain conditions that Philippines, like other countries in the fast growth category, is already favorably situated and which can continue to improve in the future. What are the conditions? The conditions that the HSBC shaped them into are called the nation's economic infrastructure, and it includes the nation's gross domestic product or GDP per capita, education, life expectancy, fertility rate, rule of law index, government consumptions, democracy index, and inflation rate. The Philippines can either remain as its level in the future or improve to its full limit and reach the optimal infrastructure. In its base case scenario, HSBC assumes that Philippines have been succeeded halfway in eliminating its imperfections, and the government will continue to improve the underlying economic infrastructure, implementing reform, increasing education, and so on and so forth. Having said that, here is how HSBC projected the Philippine GDP growth that made them into conclusion of the Philippines becoming 16th in rank among other countries in the world. From 2000 to 2010, it projected the Philippines to grow by 8.4%. From 2020 to 2030, 7.3%. From 2030 to 2040, 6.6%. And from 2040 to 2050, 5.8%. The Philippines has a booming economy with enormous potential for further growth. In fact, Philippines had emerged in recent years as one of the more dynamic Asia-Pacific economies, defying stereotypes with some impressive economic fundamentals. Despite all we have encountered in the past years, during the past administrations, we still able to survive and we are still trying to improve to our extent. There are lots of Filipinos who have stable jobs and the advancement of technologies had been created several jobs for the citizens that make the unemployment rate decreases. On the other hand, Let us look at the Philippine economy under the crisis of coronavirus or the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2019, we are one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and we finally shed our reputation as the sick man of Asia that we obtained during the economic collapse towards the end of the Ferdinand Marcos regime in the mid-1980s. The country's economic renaissance took root in the span prior to the pandemic after decades of painstaking reform, not to mention paying back debts incurred under the dictatorship. According to the Philippine Statistics data on GDP growth rates at constant 2018 prices, Philippines had been positioned over 6% average annual growth between 2010 and 2019 and was touted as the next Asian tiger economy. However, the pandemic caused the Philippine economy to decline to its lowest level of GDP, decreasing by 9.5% in 2020. It is considered as the worst drop since records began in 1947, and it is also the first time the economy has shrunk since 1998, when it contracted by 0.5%. When the tightest lockdown was implemented in the second quarter of 2020, GDP fell down as low as negative 16.9%. The economic impact of the COVID-19 reduced our foreign direct investment by 24.6%. It also resulted for the Philippine national debt to increase by 26.7%, which is 9.7 trillion pesos in 2020, and as of the end of January 2021, it rose up to 10.3 trillion pesos since the government take out new bridge loan from BSP to cover its financial obligations. In order to address the great impact of the pandemic and mitigate its long-term scarring effects on the economy and the people, Socio-Economic Planning Secretary Carl Kendrick Chua underscored the importance of the three-pillar strategy: accelerating the vaccination program by expanding vaccination sites and leveraging new technologies, opening the economy safely through localized lockdowns and pilot face-to-face classes, and fully implementing the recovery program, especially the 2021 budget. We never know what lies ahead of us or what kind of future waiting for us. People change, things change, habits change. Everything changes because that is the only permanent in this world, changes. Before, we expected our country to be among the biggest country because of its fastest growing economy. Then again, suddenly it dropped. Our expectations changes. Then a new administration comes. We will ask ourselves if the new administration will be different or will be exactly the same. We will make other anticipation and see brighter future ahead of us. Or maybe it is the other way around. Now, let me tell you one thing. In politics, if a person is accused of something, the predecessors before him had already done the same, and his successors will also do the same. And it will continue, like it never actually ends. Those politicians who attempted to push that particular person to be out of his position only wants to get in his place to profit for themselves. Because corruptions always exist. If there is a corruption in low places, what would we expect in higher places? What I want to tell you is, if we want changes, we have to on begin it in ourselves. If you are aware of what happened on the national election 2022, you will see there the true color of the Filipinos in today's society. The advancement of technologies decreases the will of the youth to learn from the book. They claim that the history is a fake and thus they are not aware of the basics in Philippine history. They believe mostly in TikTok and YouTube videos rather than believing in researches, news, and articles. They ruin friendships and relationships because of politics, not knowing that the politicians will always be politicians. Remember what a Canadian motivational speaker and self-development author Brian Tracy said, that in times of turbulence and rapid change, you must constantly be re-evaluating yourself relative to the new realities. Wake up! 20 years from now, there won't be change if people themselves don't accept the changes. If we want changes, start it in ourselves. If you want changes, start it with yourself. There, we can be able to move forward and not dwell in the past. Evaluate yourself and re-evaluate it again after 20 years, and you will see if you make a difference.